Welcome back to our channel. On today's video, we are in Sarasota, Florida, inside of a Publix that has a parking garage, and we're going to be telling you about what it's like to Uber drive during Florida's infamous off-season. If you don't know this, in the summer, all the tourists go away and the state of Florida becomes almost empty. And in that time of the year, Uber drivers, people who work for restaurants, hotel, hospitality, services, all these people suffer greatly because the number one industry in the state of Florida is tourism, and tourism practically disappears in Florida during the hotter part of the year because the snowbirds only come down when there's snow up north. And already there is a noticeable decline in the amount of passengers that I am getting, and also a significant decrease in the amount of tips. Since after all, the locals only tip about 1/3 as much as the people who are on vacation. And with the people on vacation disappearing, we're stuck passengering people who are locals that don't tip very well. Usually my tip rate for every $100 that I make off of ride fares will be something like $43 in tips. That rate is down to less than half, at about $23 per every 100 in tips, which is not enough to cover my gas. As you guys know, I Uber out of a pickup truck, and I was using the money from tips solely for fuel, which means that the fare money was all profit. But now that the tourists are gone, that mathematical equation simply doesn't work anymore. On this particular day, I was online for 9 hours, taking 17 trips. Only net fare was $107. The total with tips and other earnings came down to $137. That equates to about $14 an hour, which is exactly half of what I was making about 2 months ago when I first started. Now, to be fair, even though I was online for 9.5 hours, most of that time was not driving. I went for walks in downtown, walks on the beaches. My back hurts a lot since my surgery, so I can't just drive endlessly for 9 hours. Besides, there just simply were not enough passengers to do that. But I took breaks in parks. I took breaks to walk and hang out along the beach. So to be fair and honest, I really did a lot of recreational personal activity during those 9 hours, and I passed on most of the rides I got. My acceptance rate right now is about 50%. It means that I'm passing on half the rides I get. I've discovered that it doesn't make sense to drive long distances to pick up a passenger. So if a passenger is less than 5 minutes away from me, I'll accept the ride. But if it's more than that, it really doesn't make sense to drive to the passenger. But that's just the reality of Florida's brutal off-season, where people working in services and hospitality can see their incomes drop easily by half, but the bills continue to be exactly the same. The off-season for the locals in Florida is a brutal time of the year where the bills remain, but the tourist dollars are gone. And this is why I always say that in Florida, there is no industry, because the biggest industry that we have, tourism, is gone half the year. Now, towards the end of the day, I had one passenger who really made up the difference for everything. But had I not ran into this particular passenger who made up the difference with a confidential tip that I'm not going to talk about, it would have made for a very disappointing day Uber driving. So the first ride that I took on this particular day was at around 11 a.m. This was a passenger going from Lakewood Ranch, where I live, all the way to the airport, and they gave me an almost $8 tip. Now, I've also noticed that the younger people do not tip very well. Even if they're going to the airport, it's always the elderly or older people who do the best tipping. And that's possibly because the young people here in Florida simply do not have any income opportunities, or they simply do not care about other people. It's interesting to denote that for the most part, it's the elderly and older people who give me the best tips, as well as bring up the best conversations and generally have the best experience as a passenger, where the younger people seem to be the ones that don't like to tip, and if they do have a conversation, sometimes isn't the best either way. In fact, it's almost a sigh of relief When I see that my passenger is an older person, I know I can expect tips, and usually they're much better behaved than the younger people. Then I got a series of rides while I was at the airport, bringing people from the hotels across the street from the airport to the airport. These are very short rides. I did 2 of them, and only one of them gave me a $1 tip. Again, young people don't tip very well. Then there was a point of pickup somewhere in downtown Sarasota. Took somebody from downtown to a hotel to the airport. So this is a multiple stop type of thing. I don't see a tip through the app, but I think they might have given me like $5 cash. I can't remember. Then we had another ride across town. Now this is where things really got crappy. We're talking about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. This is when it's nothing but people wearing all black, servers, bartenders, waitresses. I took 3 rides across town. Not a single one of them left a tip. Workers, mostly females or restaurant workers, waitresses. These people are absolutely the most brutal passengers you're going to get throughout the day. And sometimes they're the only passengers you're going to get during the mid part of the day. These midday commuter passengers absolutely suck. They never tip. They know they're not going to tip, so they purposely do not engage, not even in the least minimal bit of conversation, because they know they're not going to tip. They don't want to make eye contact. They don't even want to say hello when they exit the vehicle or enter the vehicle. Nothing. They simply know they're not going to tip. They don't want to make eye contact. They're just going to sit there and be freaking robots because they know, because they're not going to tip, that they don't want to have any interaction with you. They make for the most boring rides. When I get these types of passengers, I play whatever music I want because after all, you know they're not going to tip. And then when you play whatever music you want, you can tell that they're visually disturbed by the fact that you're not even pleasing them because you also know they're not going to tip. There was 3 of these people and they're absolutely not worth even trying to please these types of people. Then things got even worse. See, throughout the day, we had picked up young people who were vacationing or doing stuff around town. It was so hot during the hot part of the day that most people opt out of walking. So you can get these short rides. Usually you're not going to get a tip, but they're short rides, and short rides mathematically make a lot of sense because of my fuel economy. A few of these short rides throughout the day, people just going very short distances simply because, well, it's too freaking hot to walk. But throughout the day, like I said, I took several breaks. Some of the breaks that I took were here in downtown Sarasota. If I found a parking spot in the shade, I would park the truck for a little bit, leave the app on in case somebody pinged, talk to people, just enjoy the day throughout the day. And that means that most of those 9 hours that were live during the app time really were not actually working. It was just me hanging out waiting for a ride worth taking to come up. And there were parts of the day where for about an hour you didn't get a single notification. But we know this part of the day is slow, and we plan accordingly with many walks and other little trips throughout the day planned out to keep me busy while the app is actually empty. And that right there means that I'm not just sitting in my vehicle like an idiot waiting for the thing to ring. I'm actually going for walks, exploring stores, and doing little things. And again, my back's been recovering a lot, but I'm still in a lot of pain, which means that I still have to have a lot of flexibility and motion. I can't just sit there in the vehicle. After a few rides, I got to stop, walk, stretch my legs a little bit, and kind of recover before I can go back to driving because I'm still in a lot of back pain. Sarasota is a beautiful city, and overall there's parks, there's beaches, there's downtown, there's so many things to do to where you can actually enjoy Uber driving. And I can say that overall, I made the best out of a crappy day. It's not just about the money, it's also about getting out there and just getting onto the beaches and enjoying the day. So I was hanging out in downtown Sarasota waiting for a ride. I finally got it. This guy needed to go from downtown Sarasota to a gated community on Longboat Key. I find myself driving through this roundabout maybe 10, 15, 20 times a day. And it's interesting how even though I'm in this roundabout all the time, I still kind of am a little bit confused about which way to go. And of course, you got to be careful because there's a lot of people who don't know how to use the roundabout, and then they try to shoot in one direction before they miss their turn. So these always suck. Now we are heading straight into the water. We're heading to the islands. We're on the causeway now. This guy was pretty cool. We had a pretty decent conversation. The views are always pretty good. And this is what makes Uber driving in the Sarasota area nice. Drives like this, where you're on the causeway heading to the beaches. Very scenic, very beautiful. This is the St. Armand Circle. This is where the famous Columbia restaurant is. And other local icons. It's a nice, beautiful place to hang out during the daytime. And despite how hot it was, there were people walking around doing stuff here. During the winter, this is way more packed. So you're looking at Sarasota, I don't know, maybe at about 5% capacity in some places, maybe 20% at best. It's definitely not packed this time of year. On Longboat Key, with its famous island golf course, most of the properties here are going to be private and gated. There's not too much commercial. There's a few restaurants and a few stores on Longboat Key, but it is considered one of the safest places in America, and that's probably because there really are not too many public places. Almost everything is private, and thus there's really nowhere to commit a crime here. You're talking gated communities on islands. It'd be very difficult to escape the law if they were looking for you. Just think about that. You're on an island, and on top of the fact you're on an island, you're also dealing with mostly gated communities. It really is one of the safest places in America. Not because the place happens to be safe, but just because, well, it's almost impossible to commit a crime on this island and be able to get away. Most of the residential areas are gated. The few public areas that exist have a very heavy police presence. I want to guess there's probably some very high profile people that live on this island because the amount of security here is abnormally large. It's visible. You even want to set your vehicle to cruise control because if you go 1 mile above the speed limit, you risk being pulled over. It really is a over-patrolled area with a lot of security, and that's kind of what somebody who can afford to live on an island would want. For the most part, this time of year, Longboat Key feels somewhat like a ghost town. Interestingly enough, I think there are a few homeless people on Longboat Key, which is just mind-boggling that a place this expensive and exclusive actually has homeless people. And it was here on Longboat Key where we ran into a passenger that tipped very generously and really made the difference for the day. We are now crossing over into Coquina Beach, so we're now actually leaving a Sarasota address and stepping into a Bradenton address. We did have to stop for the drawbridge because there was a sailboat passing, but generally this area is a bumper-to-bumper traffic jam. On this particular day, the road was completely clear. So if you've been on Bradenton Beach, Coquina Beach in the winter time or in the tourist season, you may know that sometimes it's even difficult to find a parking spot. However, when we showed up to the beach, the parking area was at over 95% capacity. A rare find, but now that the tourists are gone, the locals get to have the whole place to ourselves. And that's kind of one of the silver linings of the off season, that we finally get a break from traffic. We get to go to the beach and enjoy the whole place to ourselves. And it was really awesome and serene to be at this beach with literally nobody around, very few people scattered throughout the whole beach. It literally felt like you had the whole ocean to yourself. And that is the way beaches in Florida used to be many years ago. But today, with the increasing amount of people moving to the state, usually that's not the case. But on a weekday, on a very hot day like this, where the tourists are gone, you can literally go to the beach and have the whole place to yourself. And it's an incredible feeling that definitely brought back some memories to me of earlier days in Florida. It's really a lot of relief when the tourists are gone, you go to the beach, and you got the whole place to yourself. And I was able to enjoy a beautiful evening, enjoying the beaches, the sunset, while sporadically taking small rides from very short distances, really enjoying the natural beauty of the beach. Interestingly enough, despite the fact this is a very expensive area and most people that I was picking up on these short rides were tourists, again, none of them tipped. As the sun sets, a little mini wave of traffic picks up, people leaving bars, people leaving the beaches, and I was able to catch a few rides during this part of the evening. I ended up a few rides in Longboat Key. Interestingly, 3 of them were entering the same exact gated community, which so far I had failed to enter. This is one of the most exclusive addresses, the resort on Longboat Key. And finally, I was able to enter these gated communities. I think one of the nicest things about this Uber driving experience is that I'm able to go inside of these gated communities, see areas that a lot of people will never get to see, work with people directly, and all that, if you're a people's person, is enjoyable. I've been able to gain real life experience hands-on on who travels to this area, where people are traveling from, what they think about this area, what they like and don't like about this area. Overall, one of the most common compliments that I get about this area is how clean the hotels are. People tell me that when they travel back home, the hospitality isn't as cleanly. And cleanliness has really been one of the key points that people tell me they enjoy about this area. We are now inside the resort. This is one of the most exclusive areas in Longboat Key and in the entire metropolitan area. Some of the houses in here are pushing the tens of millions of dollars. So very big fish type of neighborhood. These aren't little guys. These are big money people that live on these exclusive island gated communities with water access. This is what the entrance to the resort looks like. Very nice establishment. Seems like the type of place, if you're coming to Sarasota and want to have a very nice time, this would be the place to do it. Now, one of the problems with Uber driving on these islands is that late at night, the lights don't work. And I was at this light for a prolonged period of time, to the point where I actually took a right, and you're going to see me pull the U-turn, and you'll see a lot of people doing this on the island. You'll also see people doing this on Siesta Key. There's a few of these lights on the island that for some reason or another will stop you, and you could be there for 10-20 minutes. Not sure why that happens, but if you're an Uber driver, you're going to have to either blow the red light in some circumstances or take a right turn and pull a U-turn, because these lights do not change color. Many times when you have a passenger, they're going to get upset at you for blowing the red light, but I'll tell you, if you don't do it, you're going to be there literally the whole entire night. These lights, for some reason, are on sensors, and the sensors do not work late at night, and you could be there forever. Of course, it's always enjoyable, and there's always potential for high tips when you're working in places like this. On this night, I entered this resort 3 times. Now that I got the drop on the specific time when people are going in and out of this resort, I'll take advantage of that and head to this area at the right time, because these are the types of places where if you figure out the right time to be at, you can get a lot of passengers, and because it's a high dollar area, there's always a potential for large tips. Now, high dollar areas don't exactly equate to high tips, but dealing with tourists does. Overall, at this particular time, I was able to catch 3 different drop-offs inside of this community, which all went smooth, and the tips were small, but they were there. At least they tipped something. So after my 3rd trip to the resort, it was time to pick up a worker and take a ride off the island. Usually when you're heading east to west, you're dealing with somebody who's getting off of work. I guess somebody worked in this little area right here, and they were getting off of work, and they were heading into North Sarasota, an area known as the most dangerous part of the city. The drive back into Sarasota at night is incredible. Sarasota's skyline isn't particularly tall, but it is very wide and beautiful. And whether you're entering it at night or in the daytime, it really is one of the nicest drives in Florida. So getting off the island, we're no longer doing north to south trips, east to west, so I can get back home where I live. It's hard to get those rides east to west, so this one wasn't exactly a perfect ride back to my destination, but it kind of set me off the island and into North Sarasota, closer to where I live in Lakewood Ranch. So I took this last ride for the evening to bring me back towards the house, enjoying one last passage through the beautiful downtown of Sarasota. And that right there is a day Uber driving in the off season in Florida. Driving back towards North Sarasota, there must have been a huge crime incident, because there was police flying through the whole night. We might have seen 7 or 8 police cars flying, so something happened late at night. Usually does. Checking out, that is Florida's horrible off-season Uber driving.